Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this PPA Live webinar. My name is Stephanie McCabe, and I'm the Events and Marketing Manager at the PPA. The PPA has been running this series for its members since the start of lockdown, and this is our 15th webinar in the series. We have supported you, our members, throughout lockdown by providing these free informative sessions on a variety of topics to help you get through this challenging time and stay connected. It's worth reminding you that PPA members can watch all of the previous talks back on demand free by going to the PPA Live website, which is ppaevents.co.uk. Our next PPA Live webinar is also focused on subscriptions, taking place next Tuesday, 17th November at 11 AM, when we will be joined by Greg Piachota of the INMA, who's going to focus on digital-only model for subscriptions. We also have the PPA Independent Publisher Online Conference coming up on Thursday, the 26th of November from 9 AM until 5 PM. And we have an action-packed agenda, including keynote presentations, publisher case studies, interviews, and deep dive workshop sessions, where delegates will join the discussions live on camera in closed roundtables. And don't forget that the PPA members get a special 3 for 2 offer on tickets. I know some of you watching this morning already have tickets, so we look forward to seeing you then, and thank you for booking. And for those of you yet to book tickets, the links to these future events will be included in your follow-up email today after this session. And before I introduce the speakers this morning, a few housekeeping points, although I'm sure most of you are familiar with Zoom webinar at this stage. There is a chat function which you can use to talk to each other throughout the session, although do make sure the setting is changed to all attendees if you want everyone to see your messages. Please note that the speakers will not be watching the chat during their talk. If you have questions for our speakers, which I'm sure you will have, there is a Q&A function on the menu to the left of the chat bar, and this is where you should post your questions. We will do our best to answer them all during the live audience Q&A after the presentations. You can upvote the questions too to make sure we cover the most popular ones first. And we'll also have a post-event survey, which will pop up on your screens automatically when you leave the session. And that's going to help us decide what the next topic will be for our subscriptions webinar. We are delighted to be joined this morning by Katie Bloor, Head of Optimization for Daydot, previously known as House of Kaizen, and Seema Kumari, Digital Marketing and CRM Director at Hearst UK, who are going to talk to you about how to identify and optimize digital revenue streams. So to kick us off, I'm going to hand over to Katie to introduce the session.
Thank
you, Katie.
Steph.
No worries.
Very much. So I'm just going to share my screen. Great. So thank you very much, Steph, for the introduction. So as Steph mentioned, I'm Katie and I work for a company called Daydot, where I head up the optimization team. So just as a very short way of introduction before we really get started with the webinar, just a quick introduction as to who Daydot are. So as Steph mentioned, we were formerly known as House of Kaizen here in the UK. We did rebrand a month ago, so this is quite a new change. So we are now Daydot, and we're a digital experience optimization agency based in London. And for the past 17 years, we've been working with brands to unleash growth. And for us, that is commercial revenue growth. And how we do this is we discover opportunities, we then enable customer understanding, and we create digital experiences based on that. And that is how we unleash a growth. And for us, growth comes from acquisition growth through to retention growth. And we deliver that through our research consultancy and end-to-end experimentation services. And we do specialize particularly within subscription growth. So naturally publishing is where we've spent a lot of our time. And for us, this is where we're optimizing the entire customer journey. So it's from that very first touch point of when that prospect lands on the page, all the way through to retaining them as a customer for as long as possible. So again, using our research, consulting, experimentation to deliver that. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Seema from Hearst. So Seema, we've been working with for 6 years now, Seema and her team, where we have been focusing on driving subscription growth through research and experimentation. So delighted that she's joined us today, and grateful as well that PPA have been able to put together this brilliant virtual event series in place of the PPA Festival. So yeah, delighted to be with her, PPA as partner and Hearst as one of our clients. So for this webinar, Seema's going to kick off and she's going to be sharing with you how Hearst have responded to the challenging times that we've all faced over the last, well, it's about 9 months now. And then I'm going to be moving on to then talk about what publishers could and should be doing to drive subscription growth. So Seema, I'll hand over to you now.
Thanks, Katie. Morning, everybody. I'm now going to try and share my screen and hoping this works. Okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen. Okay, so as mentioned, I'm Seema Kamari, Digital Marketing and CRM Director at Hearst UK. And a bit about Hearst, these are our amazing brands. We are a content business, so obviously magazines are at the heart of what we do, but we also sell beauty boxes, holidays, we've got a successful licensing arm, and yeah, here, this is Hearst. So who remembers January 2020? Seems like a distant memory, definitely to me, but fast forward a few weeks and this happened and it was all over. So these are the papers as of, I think, the 3rd week of March, mid to the 3rd week of March. And this was our early mood. So at this point, we were still in the office, but there were 3 schools of thought. The first was that if lockdown happens, nobody will buy subscriptions. You know, people are dying. Who's going to be buying a subscription or searching for a subscription? We should stop all marketing. The second school of thought was that we should just continue and see what happens. Cross our fingers, there just might be no impact. And the third school of thought, which I fell into, and straight away I started to see the dollar signs, was actually this is a huge opportunity. And my analogy that I'll use is the weather, because we know that when it's 30 degrees outside, e-commerce takes a slump. But when it's icy or it's snowing and people are at home, you know, there is a correlation. E-commerce sales do increase. And that's literally how I was assuming COVID's, you know, the COVID lockdown will be. People are at home, they're going to be searching, they're going to be bored buying. But, you know, this was quite a colourful debate at Hearst headquarters and very different opinions in the room. So as soon as lockdown happened, this is a picture of my team when we thought that we were working from home for 2 weeks. Little did we know that it was going to be 9 months, and I can assure you we wouldn't be that excited if we knew that 9 months on we'd still be at home. But the excitement was also due to the fact that subscriptions were up by 200%. Just to put this into context, when we started the year, we were actually down year on year, and you know, and there was a huge concern. So we spent February fleshing out our plans, having a complete reset. You know, none of us saw COVID coming, and just to put that 200% into absolute numbers, for those of you that have an aggressive Black Friday strategy, we were seeing numbers come in exceeding Black Friday and Cyber Monday volumes. It was unbelievable. You know, I was going into GA, literally refreshing it every 5 minutes, you know, thinking something's up, because how can numbers jump up that much? But very exciting. Our web traffic and affiliate revenue hit an all-time high. So we recorded our highest unique traffic volume to each of our websites. Our affiliate revenue, which comes about as a result of people going onto our content site, clicking and buying, again hit an all-time high. But it wasn't all good. We have an events business and we have a holidays business. We had an event taking place for women's health in mid-April. So we literally had 3 weeks to turn that around and turn that into a Facebook event. And just our luck, holidays, we were promoting cruises. So all the magazines had been printed or gone to press, and we had a big push on Far East cruises. And for those of you that can remember back to March, there was loads of noise around people being stuck on cruise ships. So it was probably the worst time to be advertising cruise holidays. And for you soap fans out there, we also publish Inside Soap, and production came to a halt. So your EastEnders, Coronation Street, they just weren't filming anymore. So there was a lot of worry, because actually, if there's no filming going on and there's nothing to write about in the coming weeks, you know, what's going to happen to this magazine? So here's what we did very, very quickly. We updated all of our marketing and copy. So we tried to not use the C word or the L word for lockdown. We tried to be really sensitive, but at the same time, highly targeted. We had to modify our cancellation programme. So as soon as the first wave of furloughs was announced, we actually realised that we saw a spike in cancellations. Now, luckily for us, we do have a robust cancellation programme in place, but we did need to be slightly agile with our pricing and our scripts to ensure that we can accommodate the people that were cancelling because of furloughs. Forecasting and scenario planning. I'd say the biggest area that was challenged for us was our scenario planning, because before we had been in control as a business. If we wanted demand, we knew what we needed to do. If we wanted to reduce our sales for whatever reason or pull back, we were fully in control. And for the first time, we found ourselves in a position that we just couldn't control this monster. And our lifetime models and our scenario planning and our forecasting, it just wasn't prepared for this demand. So what the team were able to do, and they did a fantastic job, I think working probably 24 hours a day, is come up with a number of different scenarios and planning, which, you know, thankfully have worked really well for us. We spoke to our readers to understand how they feel and what they want to see. So we have something called the Hearst panel, which customers can sign up to be part of surveys and polls and testing. And 42% of customers told us that they actually needed some positivity in their lives. You know, there was so much depressing news every time you opened Facebook, watched TV. You know, there was always a reminder of what's going on. Our brand website did a fantastic job with our content, as well as having, you know, the functional COVID-19 articles about symptoms and what to look for. You know, we injected a bit of humour into this. So, you know, what to do if you're bored, and, you know, 26 things you have to do during lockdown. So it was just incredible, the content that we produced, which I've got a few examples on, which I'll show you later. We had to explore a virtual events platform. We've never done this before. You know, we were used to putting on, you know, events at Excel and Olympia, and then all of a sudden, you know, we're having to put on virtual events, which, you know, it's a different ballgame altogether. We had to change our direction of travel. So as mentioned, from going to promote cruises, we then took a U-turn and said, okay, let's promote summer breaks and winter breaks in the UK. Obviously, in March, we had no idea that COVID would still exist in Q4. The assumption was that by summer, it would be back to normal. So, you know, and the problem with print is, obviously, once it's gone into print and the time it arrives in the customer's hands, 2 months have passed, and 2 months is a long time in the world we're in. We had a really we had a great idea, basically, to get rid of our copies, because all the airports closed. We had printed our copies in February, March time, and then with Smith travel points obviously not in operation, we had thousands of copies that we could have either thrown in the bin, but we thought, actually, let's use this as a sampling exercise. So we ran a number of Facebook campaigns from a data point of view, so that we could send a free issue out to customers and then upsell them in the process. So here are just some examples of our email marketing that we introduced during lockdown. So your image on the left is a Good Housekeeping email. you'll see we've been very subtle with this. So we're, honing in on the whole delivered direct to your door, because, that's what people wanted to see. We're injecting that positivity into this, by peppering it in our subject line, in our copy. And for House Beautiful, which, had a phenomenal few months, with everybody decorating and looking at home decor, using the subject line of, looking for home projects to keep you busy, because we knew that people were bored, because that's what they told us. And, all of this marketing, we saw some of our best open and click-through rates, as well as conversion. You then have Hearst Magazine. So an example on the left is what we call one of our hero banners. Looking back at it now, pretty flat, just about the saving. And then, turning this around and speaking to our consumers, are they staying in for the foreseeable? And you can see here that there's no mention of price, and it's all about the convenience of having it delivered directly to their door. And then moving on to our display ads. So pre-COVID, a 6 for 6 with that delicious chocolate cake. And then moving on, we still kept the chocolate cake because we thought it looked quite nice. And we completely removed price, and it's all about, again, positivity and uplifting news and delicious recipes. And again, really stressing that point about this is delivered directly to your door. So again, it's the convenience, it's safety. And then this is an example of one of our display banners in situ on our brand website. So the idea was that as people are reading things to do and the 10 best books to read this month, we've conveniently placed our display advertising next to those articles. And here's an example of our newsletter. So again, quite functional beforehand with the price. And once lockdown happened, we basically moved our subscription banner further up the newsletter articles, so it was above the fold. And again, you can see there the pronounced delivery directly to your door. So we also worked really closely with our web teams, and I'm really not just saying this because I work for Hearst, but I do believe the web team did an incredible job. I myself was actually, was really engaged with all the content, the newsletters. It was the type of content that I'd be forwarding on WhatsApp, because it was just brilliant and timely. So what we said is that, we need to create some articles that can plug subscriptions. What can you do? So here are some brilliant examples of what we put out there. Cosmopolitan, 26 fun things to do when you're stuck at home. And you'll see that we're conveniently placed as the number 2 slot for subscriptions and signing up to our newsletter. Harper's Bazaar took a slightly different approach. So 6 of the best subscription gifts to order now. So amongst cheese and gin and chocolate and crafts, we had our positioning for a Harper's Bazaar subscription. And then some more examples from Prima and Red. So you can see from Prima, the best lockdown birthday present ideas. And again, conveniently, number 11, you've got the Prima subscription. And then 14 letterbox gifts to brighten someone's day during lockdown. So this was a win-win for us, because not only was it helping us drive subscriptions, and we did drive a considerable amount through these pages, but it was also helping drive our affiliate revenue. And then these are just some examples of Delish. Delish is one of our pure play brands. And we asked our customers, what is it that you want us to create? And 82% said that they had no flour, so that they'd love to see recipes that didn't include flour. So we did just that. We asked our customers, let us know what's in your kitchen cupboard, and we'll just whip up a recipe for you. So whilst that was creating engagement and driving, a substantial amount of eyeballs, we had ensured that, amongst these articles, we've got clear signposting for subscriptions. And then here are some ideas for affiliate revenue generating articles. So as mentioned, you know, on our content sites, if you click and buy, we get a kickback for every sale. So the team just really jumped on this. So, you know, the first article there from Men's Health, you know, want to cut your hair yourself. You know, you had about 20 different clippers on here. You know, one of the best affiliate yielding articles that we've ever produced. House Beautiful, with people buying plants and flowers, garden furniture, sorting out their outdoor space. You know, this is the type of content that really resonated with not just our readers, but to the nation's mood. We've got Women's Health, yoga mats. This still continues to be one of our most popular articles. I don't know how that iPhone 12 banner slipped on there. That should be one of the subs ads, but you know, you can see how we were strategically just placing everything next to the highest rendering articles. And then for Runner's World, the best running shoes. So we knew that people are running. Runner's World subscription saw an all-time increase. And actually, what a better way to monetize that audience than to actually tell them what shoes to buy online. So in terms of lessons learned, and I just want to say we are still learning and still making mistakes. And I'd say the first most valuable lesson is don't underestimate revenue diversification. I'd say this is the biggest lesson I've learned, in that if Hearst were to be a holidays business or just an exclusive events business, you know, we'd be in huge trouble right now. Luckily for us, you know, we do have a number of revenue streams, which has obviously put us in the position we're in. But there are some organisations and companies out there that do have all their eggs in one basket. So it's definitely made us think bigger, big picture. Another lesson learned is that a crisis makes you accelerate your thinking and ideas. So whilst we had a number of tasks and projects on our to-do list, we never got around to it because there wasn't the urgent need to, because we were doing really well. However, you know, COVID did really put a rocket up our backside to help, you know, fast track those ideas and thinking, because, you know, if those ideas were live, then, you know, again, we would have just safeguarded ourselves further from any revenue loss. Don't rest on your laurels. So, yeah, don't just assume that COVID is now over, the vaccine's out, hey, life's going to resume from April. You know, no, you know, we thought that this was going to be over. I mean, I personally thought I'd be back in the office by the end of April, May. So just don't assume. And this kind of takes me on to my next point about, you know, being agile and having additional plans in your back pocket. You know, it does no harm. So in the summer, we actually were having discussions about a second lockdown. And I've said to my team that just in case Q4 we're in a lockdown, we need to be prepared. We need to have a different campaign. We need to have different copy. And, you know, thank God we did do that, because we were prepared. And when the lockdown was announced 2 weeks ago, you know, there wasn't that sudden panic or rush that we had back in March. Even when you think you know it all, you actually don't. So, as I said, we are learning, we have made mistakes, we have missed the boat on a few things. We've done some things brilliantly, but we've also, you know, completely messed a few things up. But we're learning, and actually, you know, as we know, you learn more from failure than you do success. And the last point, but a very important point, is thank God for magazine subscriptions. You know, they have really saved the day, and are finally getting the recognition that they deserve from the business and all departments. And I think as an industry, you know, we've absolutely smashed it. So it's what was needed to put magazine subscriptions on the radar. You know, I think that success that we all saw as publishers earlier on, and we continue to see now, will continue well into next year. regardless of what the situation's going to be, and regardless if it gets back to normal in a few months. Yeah, just really happy that we had all the operations and processes, ideas, innovation, and a team in place to be able to accelerate and fast track what we do, rather than having to start from scratch. So that's it from me. So I'm going to hand this over to Kate now.
Great, thank you very much, Seema, for that. So what I'm going to do now is sort of following on from Seema's last point there on sort of, thank God for subscriptions, what brands can be doing to really now drive subscription growth even more so than what we've already seen. So I'm just going to share my screen and present. Great. So for the next 15 minutes, what I'm going to be focusing on is kind of that initial subscription growth that has already been delivered. How can we actually be driving that further? So before I go into that, I thought it was just worth looking back actually at pre-COVID, so say this time last year, like where was revenue actually coming from? And sort of these circles here, they show sort of the different places that you're getting revenue from, how much revenue was being delivered from each stream. And this will be different for each business based on their model, their proposition. But one thing that was really common for all was that advertising revenue really did dominate. You had good diversification, but there was advertising revenue was really the lion's share of advertising of revenue. And what we saw that COVID very quickly changed that. And the publishing industry was in a very unique place actually, where there was wins and losses, as Seema mentioned. So advertising revenue was massively down. Businesses were pausing, reducing advertising spend, up to 80+% decrease in advertising revenue. Events suddenly couldn't take place in person. They had to go online. But then we did see wins. So revenue was up in e-commerce, in affiliates, news stand print. But subscription revenue really was where a lot of the revenue was being driven from. And as Seema said, thank God for subscriptions. What we've learned is that advertising revenue really is not where we should be focusing. It's not sustainable to be relying on advertising revenue. Diversification is needed, and subscription revenue is really where there's a huge opportunity. And there's a few reasons why subscriptions present such a great opportunity. And really it's around future-proofing, something that we've all learned is something that's really important for times like this. So firstly, subscription businesses are inherently a lot more flexible. You can change and experiment with your offering based on changes to the market, changes to consumer needs. There's a much higher return, on your customer acquisition costs, which increase your profit margins. And then you're able to more accurately and reliably predict what is a key revenue stream. And then finally, by creating an engaged and loyal subscriber base, you're able to secure long-term recurring revenue, which then actually also that customer base can fuel other revenue streams through sort of cross and upselling strategies. And we will get through this. We will weather the storm. Advertising revenue will naturally increase at some point, but there's only so much that you can do about that now. Importantly, subscription revenue is where you can make changes now. Now, as we mentioned, subscription revenue has increased. That's largely been due to an external factor. People staying at home, they are wanting a magazine subscription for a form of entertainment. But there's so much more opportunity by focusing on subscription revenue. And for us, growth in subscription doesn't just come from acquisition, which is typically where businesses do tend to focus. It comes from retention and cross-sell as well. So in this diagram, what you can see is that typically only 5 to 30% of revenue does come from that initial subscription sale. The rest of the revenue, between 70 and 95%, actually comes from renewals and upsell. So for us, subscription growth comes from both acquisition and revenue. So how can you drive subscription revenue growth? So to truly drive substantial growth, a mindset change is needed within the business, which, as Seema said, within Hearst Magazine's UK, different parts of the business are now starting to look at subscriptions and think, oh, okay, actually, this could be driving a lot of revenue for us. So that mindset shift is needed. And that usually comes from determining some form of cross-company goal that everyone is working towards. Secondly, putting the customer at the heart of your business. So anything, all the data, the research you're getting from your customer, that becomes pivotal to decisions that are being made within the business. And then that informs your acquisition strategy, your acquisition experience to make it as best as possible. And then finally, developing strong customer relationships. I'm not going to be able to, in the next sort of 15 minutes, go into the details of how to become a subscriber first business. So what I'm going to be focusing on is key points that hopefully you can take away today and start doing now, start driving some of that initial growth. And to do that, I'm going to walk you through the framework that we use with our clients. So it's broken into 3 key stages to start with. So the first one is to identify those growth opportunities. So this is where you're going into your data to really identify sort of where are the acquisition barriers and drivers, what is stopping people, at what point is it that people are not converting? And the same from a retention point of view, at what point is it that we're losing people in the journey? So this would involve you mapping out the end-to-end customer journey, looking at this by device, by channel, by customer segment, analysing that journey, so looking at conversion rates, drop-offs, again, by the different segments. And then finally, identifying the highest performing journeys. And what is it that makes them high performing? Is there specific journeys we want to take our customers down when they've just subscribed, or specific journeys we want to take prospects down so they subscribe? Once you've then identified sort of where the opportunities are, and it's really important that it's the where, like where should you be focusing your time? Where should we be prioritizing? You then need to start uncovering customer insights. So this is when you start to layer in attitudinal and behavioral research to start understanding the why. So as an example, we could say, okay, well, I can see that people are dropping off on the shop page. Okay, so now we need to understand why that is happening. That's where this research comes into play. So there are so many questions that you would most likely want to be asking at this point. So what's the level of awareness of the subscription proposition? Are people aware? Do they see value in it? If they don't, why don't they? What's stopping people? Is there points of anxiety that are making people not subscribe? Does our pack and pricing fit the needs? Why aren't people signing up to the newsletter? Why aren't subscribers reading digital content? Why, if they cancel, why is that? And how could we present them? The list goes on, but that first stage where you're uncovering opportunities will help you kind of guide the initial list of questions that you're looking to answer with research. And then from that, you'll start to build out your strategic roadmap. So this strategic roadmap, firstly, using the data from the first and second step, will be data-driven and customer-focused, which is incredibly important because the likelihood of success is so much higher, and it allows you to focus on the biggest revenue-driving opportunities. So there's a few areas that this strategic roadmap will cover. There'll be the identify and planning for JDI, so the just do it. So things like this FAQ isn't clear. We don't need to test that. We're just going to go and update that. You'll have a whole list of JDIs that come out of that research and analysis. Then identifying and planning any strategic projects. So this could be things like value proposition development, a new pricing strategy, developing some form of data or payroll. Thirdly, looking at experimentation. So for some of you, you may be already doing A/B testing within the business, and you'll have some process for ideation and prioritization. From this research, you're going to have so many ideas. You'll probably come up with 100 or so different ideas, and then it's important to prioritize them based on the data that you've collected, the insights you've got from those first couple of stages, and building out a roadmap for that. And then finally, developing an always-on research plan. So making sure that you're always collecting research, always got a finger on the pulse of what your customers are saying, where the areas for opportunity are. And this is a process that you don't just do once and you're set for the year. This is something you do, and then you continuously iterate, you're continuously learning, and data is kind of feeding in at every stage. So to put some of this into practice a little bit, Typically what we find once we've gone through that process with our clients is that from an acquisition point of view, with a view of increasing propensity to subscribe, it will fall into sort of 3 key stages. The first one will be increasing engagement with the brand and content. Typically, the more they engage at this stage, the longer they stay as a customer when they do subscribe. So this is really important. Secondly, is to increase awareness and the value perception of your subscription. And then finally, once they do start to have this awareness, they're motivated to find out more about the subscription. It's increasing the number of people that are purchasing at that point of time. And that is where the initial subscription revenue comes in. So just some examples in terms of increasing engagement. Here we've really focused on how can we increase the number of touch points that prospects are engaging with. So this can be on-site content engagements when people have come to your site for the first time, second time, third time. How can you increase how much content they are reading? And this really looks at testing the homepage layout, testing the article page, the site navigation. How are you getting people to read more of the content, enjoy it, have a really good experience, but then also going on to read more and I'll be able to choose articles really easily. And then secondly is off-site content engagement. So how can you drive people back to your site, but also how can you engage them in other ways? So increasing newsletter signups, and there's an example there of a test we ran for Hearst Magazine, the module. How can we increase newsletter signups and other touch points you might have, like social media follows, podcast listens, app downloads, etc. The second stage, so increasing awareness and perception. Here, what we're doing is really focus on, okay, well, how can we create that awareness and motivate them to click through to the shop? So for many of you, you'll already have some form like subscribe button or maybe a little ad placement on your site. Typically, what we find is that regardless that the awareness of subscriptions is still really low, and even more so for brands who don't have some form of paywall or data wall. If you think about sort of your content site, there's so much going on there, there's so much content, so typically they might not even see a subscription button. So here we look at, okay, well, how can we create that awareness, increase the click through to the shop? So the messaging strategy, like how do we want to be talking about this subscription? What's the best way to communicate the value of it? How do we contextualize that within the content, as Seema showed some examples earlier? Secondly, looking at the delivery strategy, how do we actually get attention to this module? There's so much going on typically on content sites. How do we actually capture that awareness? So looking at the place, the position, how we're delivering it, the design of it. And again, an example here when we added a sort of a pop out on hover for the Wall Street Journal to create sort of heightened awareness. And then finally, a data and paywall. So for some of you on the call, you already have this in place. For some of you, may not. But it's a really important as we start to look to monetize content more, considering should there be some form of value exchange. And if you already have a data and paywall in place, as you're already aware, there are so many different ways that you can use that paywall, some different types, should it be dynamic or not? How much content should you be showing? So that in itself presents a huge area of opportunity for how much content you do let people read for free. And then finally, looking to increase the number of people who are subscribing once they hit your shop and checkout. So here, there is so many different things you could be doing, as you can imagine. I've just included several things here that typically we look at a higher level, but there are hundreds of tests you could be running on your shop and checkouts. So really looking at the value proposition, how do you best communicate the features and benefits that are really going to make people want to subscribe? Secondly, addressing any points of anxiety. Are people concerned about the cancellation policy and that's stopping them from cancelling, from subscribing because they don't know if I don't like it, how do I cancel? From a pack point of view, making sure that the packs that you sell actually fit the needs of your customers. And then from a pricing point of view as well, making sure that you've got an optimal price that fits the needs of your customers, of your prospects, but actually also helps retention. What you don't want to do is be bringing everyone in on a really cheap intro offer and then they're churning at the end of that 3-month offer, say. And then finally, the UX and functionality. So how can you be reducing the effort to purchase, make it as easy and simple as possible? So again, here an example from WWD, Women's Wear Daily over in the US. Typically for publishing brands, one of the problems often we have is that we're selling maybe 3 different subscriptions, 3 different packs with various term lengths, which can make displaying that quite complicated. And then just to finish up in terms of retention and upsell. So again, there is so much that can be done here. And I think especially within publishing, there's so much more to be done and so much opportunity. So in terms of what the goal should be from a retention point of view is around creating habits. Now, creating habits, measuring engagement with subscriptions that are print-based is hard. You can't tell if people are opening the magazine every time they get it, how much time they're spending reading it. But what you can do is to try and increase the breadth of the product usage. So again, thinking about the podcast, the app, the newsletters that you have, your product site, and increasing the frequency of how often they are engaging with your products as well. And from that, you'll increase retention and customer lifetime value. So to start with, we've got the retention funnel. So looking at the onboarding of new customers. Secondly is the ongoing engagement of customers. So once they've been through onboarding, how do we continuously engage them? And then finally, the cross-selling of other products. So in terms of onboarding of new customers, the aim here is to really increase the number of touch points they're engaging with at this point. Now, once they first purchase, that initial moment when they're on the thank you page, that is when they are most primed to start to understand the value of your product, of your offering. They've just spent money, they want some form of value exchange. And typically with a print magazine subscription, they could be waiting weeks before they actually see the initial return on their purchase. So developing an on-site onboarding experience which immediately captures their attention and promotes the features is an absolute win that everyone should have in place. And we've been testing the Wall Street Journal's onboarding experience for 2 years now. For 2 years, we've just been testing this onboarding experience, and there is so much opportunity there. And then finally, developing an onboarding email campaign. So focusing on high value messaging, non-promotional emails to really engage with the brand in those first 30 days. And then the ongoing engagement of customers as well. So after those first 30 days, how do we keep increasing the number of touch points? You should be looking to develop things like a subscriber hub. So a web page that they can go to really see the full value. They know they're getting their magazine subscription, but what else could they be enjoying? So really focusing here on other value points that they could be enjoying. Developing an email campaign as well, which encourages people to go back to explore other content that might be of value to them that isn't in the print. And then finally, personalization on site as well. So making that digital content as valuable and relevant to them as possible, so that when they're waiting for their next magazine, there's still all this great content they can be reading online. And then finally, just to finish up, is the cross-selling of other products and subscriptions. So again, there's quite a few different opportunities for this, as you're sure already aware. A couple that we've found have worked really well is, again, on that order confirmation page, we've been testing with the Wall Street Journal adding a Barron's subscription onto their thank you page. The Barron's is sort of a sister brand to the Wall Street Journal, and 2.2% of people that hit the thank you page actually purchase a Barron's subscription, which is a pretty impressive conversion rate considering that that is where it's sold. So there's huge opportunities for cross-sell at this point. And then developing email campaigns that are targeted, again, based on their needs, based on their interests. And finally, developing some form of product shop where they can go and engage with all different types of products that you offer. As Seema mentioned, there's a huge amount of diversification that's happening now. So what events are there? Holidays, subscription boxes, other magazine subscriptions that you offer. So there's a huge opportunity here as well, which really then helps to drive more more revenue elsewhere. So I'm going to finish up there so we can head into the Q&A. As Steph mentioned at the start, we are going to be running another webinar early next year, which will be a follow-on from this. So there's going to be a poll when you leave with a few different options. So we'd love to get your feedback on from today's webinar, what you'd like to hear more about, so we can make that next webinar sort of as useful for you guys as possible. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Katie. And Seema as well. So much to unpack there. Have we got Seema back on screen? There she is. Brilliant. Hi. And you're on mute, Seema, just to let you know. No, that was really amazing. Thank you so much. So much to digest, and I'm sure everyone will be watching it back on demand to scribble. I couldn't write down my notes quick enough, but thank you both. Yeah, one question I had just to obviously, Seema, you mentioned the subs are up by 200%, which is just incredible. And Katie, you've just been talking as well about retaining new customers. And I guess, are there any early indications of churn from those first lockdown new acquisitions?
Yeah, really positive actually. So we were monitoring this from April in terms of our forward cancellations, because obviously if people are on a 3 or 6 month subscription, we have to wait. So when we looked at it back in like May, June time, we didn't see any difference to our normal churn rate. Since then, obviously the numbers have come through, and we actually saw an improvement in churn, which is amazing, because I'm sure many on this call have heard me talk about this, because there were different schools of thought in regards to how it's going to work. So some people were saying that actually, all these people are just using us, they're binging on our content and they won't be loyal. Others were actually saying there's an opportunity because people can read and engage with the magazine because they've got time. And clearly the latter was true, because that's what we're seeing in our numbers.
Brilliant. Great. And we've got a question from Anna Lobb, and that's, what new business models are you considering, and will paywalls or paid content plans be accelerated?
Yeah, so data walls, memberships, new product ideas. So, Katie mentioned subscription boxes. We're already in the beauty box space, but they're one-off boxes. They're not on a subscription, but actually, what's stopping us from creating other types of boxes? We've got the readers, we've got the brands, we've got the content. So, as publishers, we are more set up than most to give these new product ideas the best chance.
Brilliant. Katie, do you want to add anything, or?
No, I was just going to say that sort of other brands as well, even sort of local newspapers in your area, also are looking at starting to introduce paywalls. So I think there's definitely been a shift within the industry that monetization of content should be looked at. And I saw a question as well around how do you suddenly explain to people, oh, this content that you've had for free for all these years is suddenly going to be paywalled? And it's a really important question. It's something that requires a lot of thinking about as well. And this is where sort of testing, experimentation becomes so important, because if you're creating a paywall, put it out and that's that, we're done, that's going to be a little bit of a shock. And also you might not be putting out the best strategy to start with. So really understanding, speaking to your customers, thinking about what is the best way to create this paywall, and creating that narrative as well around, well, how do we actually explain to people that we have to have a paywall? And that's something that, like, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, they are two big players who did this from a newspaper point of view. And it's all around, how do we explain that, journalism costs money, editorial costs money, and it's so valuable. There's a lot of thinking that has to be done in there, but we're starting to see more businesses considering that now.
Brilliant. Yeah, that kind of covers the question there from Garfield, I guess, is how do you best convert a person or a company who's been getting a free for years to paid for annual subscription? So it's really about trying to get the message across to them. Is that what you mean about how journalism isn't free? So it's getting that message across is probably the best way.
Yeah, and sort of research as well. So the people who are paying for some form of content, be that magazine, why is it that they pay for that in the first place? So from a content point of view, so understanding why people are willing to pay for it and weaving that into your narrative as well. Yeah. So thinking about, okay, what would be valuable to the customer? Because what can sometimes happen is, from a business, you think that this is what we should be saying, but actually the customers have a very different point of view, which does need to be considered as well.
Brilliant. And there was a question that was entered before the event, actually, from one of our members, Salt Media, Nick Cooper. And it's kind of tied in with this as well, I suppose. And it was, what advice, like what first steps would you say? And I know, Katie, you covered a bit of this in your talk about what steps would you, for someone who's never had a subscription before, how would you, what are the first steps to actually making a subscription from a paid, or from a free magazine, sorry, from a magazine that's usually free? What first steps would you take to moving into a subscription?
Yeah, so I think the first step really is, as I said, to develop some form of like goal and vision that everyone is working towards. Typically, if you've got different parts of the business working towards different goals, it can take a lot longer to get there and kind of go around the houses a little bit. So firstly, bringing in that alignment, and then very quickly after, doing customer research. So really starting to speak to the audience out there, speaking to prospects, bringing in focus groups, and from there start to get some research that will start to inform the proposition. And then that's kind of like your first step. And then after that, you start to build out more of a roadmap of how you will get there. Quite a few different steps, and they're the first to like get everyone aligned.
Exactly.
And then start speaking to your customers about it.
Yeah, I guess customer knowledge about your market research is really important, I guess, at that point. And Seema, there's a question that's come in from Kathleen Morgan at the RPS Journal. How did Hearst speak to its readers during the first lockdown to find out what they want?
Through a number of channels, actually. The first being social media, because it's just so easy, and people are really responsive. And secondly, we have what's called the Hearst panel. So we started this initiative a few years ago, inviting our readers to sign up. And the Hearst panel is made up of readers across all our magazines, and we basically just ask them questions. It's basically free insights for us from highly.
I actually completed one on Instagram the other day.
Oh, did you? Yeah. It's brilliant, and I've started to use for marketing as well, because I'm thinking let's just ask them and do an A/B test, which creative resonates with them the most. So we are using that panel more and more, but we simply went out to them, asked them their mood, how they feel, what they'd like to see more of, less of, and then basically tailored our approach accordingly.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, it certainly worked on me anyway. Got a women's health fan in the making here. Okay, and a question from Jim Bilton. Where do digital magazines or digital editions fit? Are they bundled into an overall sub, or do you sell them in their own right? Or are they used as a free sampler, Readly, Apple News, or etc.?
Yeah, so during lockdown, we basically enhanced all of our digital editions, because it's never been the centre of our strategy. But we realised that actually now is the time we could have done with enhanced editions that are optimised. And I'd hate to admit it, before that they weren't. They were a standard PDF replica. So we underwent and basically optimised all of our editions. We did run a few campaigns from a lead gen point of view with a view to upsell. But did they change the world? Not really. Did we see an increase coming in from Readly and Apple? Yes, we did. And actually, for the effort that we put into our individual campaigns, it was better for us just to ride on the back of the growth of Readly and Apple.
Okay, perfect. And there's another question from Vivian Matthews around digital subscriptions as well. Was there a higher demand for digital only subscriptions during lockdown or during the autumn? And is this part of Hearst's strategy?
Yes, so I think I kind of answered that in my previous answer. So there wasn't a defined strategy, other than there's no point us selling something if it's not optimized.
Okay.
And we did see an increase, but through our partner sales.
Brilliant. And then there's the last question. Are you expecting an increase in churn as the world potentially gets back to normal?
Yeah, I think that's inevitable. That's going to happen, because people have less time to read. People will be spending less time at home. So yeah, we are prepared for that. I think it will be quite choppy for several months, but you know, we've got the plans in place and the processes. So if that does happen, we're prepared. And hey, we've got a year out of them. At first, we thought we'd only get 3 months. So
Yeah,
that's positive.
Brilliant. Well, I think we're just about ready to wrap up there, unless you've anything else to add before we do. So thank you so much, Katie and Seema, for taking the time out this morning. It was an absolute joy to have you both. Such an informative session. We really appreciate you doing this for the PPA. And as a reminder, the next PPA live webinar and subscriptions is next Tuesday, the 17th of November at 11 AM. And we also have a session coming up about Brexit transition arrangements, hosted by Lewis Silken on November the 20th at 9:30. And the links will all be in your follow-up emails. So that just leaves me to say thank you all so much for joining in. And thank you again to our speakers. And I hope you all have a really good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Goodbye,
guys.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye.